Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147, of course, a big part of your workday. Also, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, broadcasting today from the friendly, sunny confines of Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm in the Lethbridge studio. It has not happened very much in 2025. We're into May, and I don't know how many times I have not. We're in the minority, I'll tell you that. But it is great to be here, and the wind's not blowing. It's a beautiful day. A lot of seed getting in the ground. People are done seeding in some respects here. So, spring is moving. Today on the show, we got Ann Wasko, Gateway Livestock Exchange, will be with us to give us an update from a beef perspective. Then we've got a RealAg Issues panel, Tyler McCann, Lyndsey Smith, and Kelvin Heppner. Of course, Tyler McCann is the managing director at CAPI, so looking forward to having him on the show here today. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's take a break. Let's get to it, and we'll have Ann Wasko right after this. Time for a product spotlight with Nutrien Ag Solutions. Joined right now by Rob Clayton, the Senior Vice President of North American Retail. Margins are tight in the cropping sector. It's one of those years where let's get to the other side of it. Live to fight another day, so to speak. You've also got some financial support services or products that you offer your customers as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really about being one partner and all in, as we say. We like to think of ourselves as the organisation that you come to for all of your farming needs, including the in-crop financing. And Nutrien's invested about $3.5 billion into a financing program for our growers so that they can get the products when they agronomically need them, not when their cash flow allows. It's a really important part of farming in North America, and particularly while we've got compressed crop prices.
If somebody wants more information, obviously in a lot of the local communities there is a Nutrien store, but are there other ways to reach out?
NutrienAgSolutions.com is a good way. There's lots of different ways you can contact our people, but really the best way, go into your local store, meet the local people and see what they got to offer.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Applying your tags with the manufacturer's recommended applicator for your specific tag can help prevent losses from factors beyond your control. The right applicator locks the components together, increasing retention. For best practices, you can visit retentionmatters.ca or call 877-909-2333. Well, somebody I know uses the right applicator all the time. It is Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, for this week's Beef Market Update. Ann, how are you doing?
Good day. I'm great, Shaun.
You never use the wrong applicator on the ranch, do you?
Never. Let's just stop.
I didn't realize how there's a lot of people that are using the wrong applicator, and it's a big deal. So encourage everybody to go to the website retentionmatters.ca. Okay, Ann.
Wow.
Steamy, hot. Like, we're getting into some warm temperatures. And it's not just the barometer that's gone up. It is also the cattle markets. What is at work here?
Well, we certainly are in some more new price high territory this week on both sides of the border. So that's exciting news. I look at the calendar, of course, and I wonder, are we getting close to that top? But let's talk about what happened this week. So in the South, Texas, Kansas, we were $3 higher again. So 218 to 221 live. In the North, the Nebraska live markets were 225 to 228. So that's going to be called anywhere from $3 to $5 higher than last week. Dressed, 352 to 360 delivered. Those are US dollars, yes.
Wow.
And that's $4 to $8 higher than last week. So just an amazing run as we continue to chop at new levels. Timing on the calendar is about right, as I mentioned, but certainly these levels are higher than I think many of us thought. Although some of these target areas that we're at now are kind of, if you were looking at the technicals, we're getting really close to those targets for highs.
Now, like the prices in the last week, they're not impacting prices on Canadian long weekend in May or Memorial Day. That beef was bought quite a while ago, correct?
Correct. Demand has been solid. So again, that choice cutout that we keep watching. The kills have been off. You know, we've seen packers with their losses dropping their kills. And so some support to the cutout was expected. It was a little slow in coming, but this week we saw the choice cutout close almost $5 higher than last week. So 347.90. Again, this is that time period from a demand perspective as we head into that grilling season. So all of this is part and parcel. Demand is strong. Prices are up, supporting certainly these higher cash cattle prices. So the other big jump was on the Select product. We talk a lot about the Choice product. Select jumped $9. So Choice was up $5 and the Select was up $9 this week. So it's strong on all cuts.
Yeah, on those the Choice Select spread, I had a listener email out somebody from outside the beef business who had said, why don't you report the Canadian numbers? And the reason is that we don't have them. So that's the simplest way to
good call. Now, I'll just before we leave prices, let me just finish on the local market because we keep making new levels as far as new highs here in Alberta. So the fat cattle market on a dress basis here this week was up $3. Dressed $4.90 to $4.93 delivered. Feedlots are really basically into their calf fed, so those lighter type carcass weights, and that's showing up in the data. Last week's steer weight nationally and here in Canada was 905 pounds. That's 11 pounds below this same week last year and 16 pounds below that 5-year average. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but the numbers keep coming down. That's certainly helping to shore up that drop in production. Fed cattle production in Canada is actually down 10% from a tonnage perspective this year. Last year when we talked about it, the kill wasn't much different, but carcass weights were up 25, 30 pounds, right? So that all those pieces all come together to talk about tonnage. So just wanted to make those points.
Yeah. StatsCan put out some data regarding live cattle exports. What did that show us?
Okay, so Shaun, this is March data. I want to be really clear because here we are into May and sometimes that delay kind of catches us. We knew March was super busy. If you recall, that was right ahead of that April 2nd tariff announcement, unknown announcement date. So March was busy. This is the data from StatsCan that confirms what we all saw happening at the border crossings in Western Canada. So fed cattle exports in March, so fat cattle going straight to packing plants in the U.S. were up 21%. For that whole first quarter of this year, we're up 32%. So about 158,000 head of fat cattle went south in that first quarter. On the feeder cattle side, and we knew this was busy, we don't normally, not in recent years, we haven't sent many feeder cattle south, but we were 3 times what we sent in March of last year. So 300%. So Q1, when you do Jan, Feb, March, 163% increase. That's about 58,000 feeders went south in that first quarter. So a busy one. Cow exports were also up 10% in March. So you saying what went south? My answer is basically everything.
Everything did. Now, the ramifications of those numbers later on in the year, does that mean the back end of the year we're going to have to pull a bunch of feeder cattle north? Like what will we be watching there, or does it just doesn't really matter?
We will be watching the feeder cattle imports closely. We know in the last few years that's been the only way Western Canadian feedlots have been able to fill pens. Yeah. So that will be a key. Do they fill the pens? They'll have to use imports to do it, I suspect. or do we see some pens go empty? And speaking of pens, Canfax will release their May 1 report this afternoon. So that's the cattle on feed report for Alberta and Saskatchewan. When you say based on what we've done in the first quarter and April, I think it's my guesstimate for this afternoon's report is to see those on feed numbers continue to drop. April 1 was down 4%, just as a reminder. So we'll drop. And I also expect April placements to be down because after we've sent so many cattle south, things have just gotten really quiet.
So pen utilization down.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see that. I think we'll see that show up in the data. And the other kind of supporting factor to this discussion is what's going on, or maybe I should say what's not going on at Alberta auction markets. So now that we've kind of finished up the month of April data, we can talk about how many cattle didn't move through markets in the month of April, down 38% from last year. But it wasn't just 1 month. March was down 16%. We've been so busy on the export front that it was really quiet through the markets. So I know it was erratic through the first quarter, some weeks big, some weeks small, but when the dust all settles, our auction market volumes are way off the mark.
And just to circle back on this, so we saw those liners, like, you know, you stop at a Flying J or some other truck stop, there were cattle liners like crazy. You'd see them going on Highway 3 towards British Columbia, down to Coots as well. So we saw the liners on the highway. So these numbers confirm that. And this is all related to those, you know, the Trump tariffs, threats of tariffs, the uncertainty that all that had created.
Yeah. So the word we're using now, I guess, when we talk about this is front loading,
yep.
Right? So it was all in an unknown anticipation of what might happen. In hindsight, you know, it didn't materialize the way some thought, but nevertheless, producers made those actions ahead of time.
So some people be asking, okay, so we saw a pretty good increase there of live cattle going south to be slaughtered and harvested in the U.S. Was there that much access kill hook space that like, how did that all, like, what didn't happen because of that?
Well, certainly because we're talking about the size in the Pacific Northwest in terms of harvest capacity, and again, tighter supplies pretty much everywhere. I do think, you know, especially for that period of time. And remember, our basis levels were well back in the U.S., so the cattle were good value, even though they were great prices for us as Canadians. For a U.S. packer, I think they would be looked at as good value. So you find a place to harvest good value.
Talking to some of the farmers that are, you know, getting going with seeding here, and it's off to a pretty good pace across Western Canadian prairies. A lot of that's because of how dry it is. We're going to get this crop out of the ground, and farmers, ranchers alike, we need some rain. Yeah,
and grass and hay, we know for those of us on the ranching side, you need that early moisture, and of course that was very much lacking. So we're going to need some real timely moisture here, PDQ.
Before Canada, like for the pasture, we really need to get that before the heat really comes in July, correct?
Yeah, where I live, there's not much in terms of grass that grows in July.
Yeah,
it's got to happen before that. Yeah,
Mother Nature, you hear that? Now. Hey, Ann, have yourself a great weekend. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks, Shaun. You too.
That's Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange for the beef market update. Always love chatting with Ann. Hey, with volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be a part of the solution. It's time to secure your future with Genesis Fertilizers. Gain control and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more. That's genesisfertilizers.com. We've got the RealAg Issues panel coming up. This has been one heck of a busy week, and we'll try to get to as much of it as we possibly can when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Every successful harvest story begins with the right seed. And at Alliance Seed, we're committed to helping you achieve success every year. Our top-performing wheat, barley, oat, pea, and lentil varieties are tailored to meet the unique challenges of your farm, ensuring high yields, strong standability, and reliable disease resistance. Discover the Alliance difference at allianceseed.com or call 1-877-270-2890.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
It's tagging time, and CCIA has you covered. Their online web store is your one-stop shop for approved beef cattle tags and pre-approved cervid and goat tags. Order anytime, anywhere. It's fast, it's reliable. Visit tags.canadaid.ca, your trusted source for traceability. Okay, let's bring in the RealAg Issues panel. I can tell you they are fired up. I don't think we have enough time for all the topics that this group wants to get to. Up first, Lyndsey Smith, coming out of the nation's capital, Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, what's it like to be hockeyless like me?
You know, well, I'm over it, I think. And now we're on to watching this next round. Nowhere to lie. The last Florida Leafs game, I had trouble getting Charlie to turn off the TV. She's 7, everybody. She's like, but Mom, there's 10 more minutes in this period. And I'm like, it's bedtime. She's like, no, I got to watch this. So the next generation, alive and well. P.S. Kelvin, she was cheering for Florida. Anyway.
I don't know how people, like, if I lived in the Eastern time zone based on the time I like to go to bed, I would never see a game past. Like,
I don't see a lot of the Eastern or Western ones.
No.
I watch highlights in the morning. It's great.
I don't understand why the Eastern games can't start at 6. Like, why do we go all the way to... You could. Like, come on.
Yeah. Anyway.
Brutal.
Let Toronto know.
Yeah, I'm sure they care. Also joining us right now is Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. He took some time to chat with us, got off the cedar. And are you done, Kelvin?
Not done, but we are finished wheat and canola. Cereal crops and canola are in. We are switching to soybeans, so hoping to get into that later today, maybe tomorrow.
Nice. How's moisture levels?
Dry. It's quickly turning here, and it's been windy, and we're expecting some really hot temperatures, a heat wave rolling in here over the weekend, and quickly turning into feeling kind of droughty. There's smoke in the air today, strong winds, and things are drying up quickly.
Fast. We just talked to Wasko, Gateway Livestock Exchange, about that in the beef market update. I heard from Brad Rippey, chief meteorologist with USDA this week. It is concerning for this continued area, the west half of the U.S. and the Canadian prairies. It's not good. Need some moisture. Also joining us, he's the managing director at CAPI. It is Tyler McCann. Tyler, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, Shaun. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, how was your week?
It's been pretty good. Been busy. I think we're all waiting for a new cabinet to get appointed in Ottawa here. We'll get that next week. Lots of eyes tuned to Washington for a day, and it wasn't just because you were there, Shaun. So look forward to diving into some of that stuff.
Yeah, I unfortunately did not have that coffee as Lyndsey had suggested with Carney. Tried. Yeah. You know, so I was at the National Association of Farm Broadcasters meeting. I come to find out that we were going to visit the Canadian Embassy. How cool would that have been? Mm-hmm. They couldn't do it. They said it was. I think it's because the Prime Minister was in town. Sort of a bigger deal than that.
Just a little.
Okay. Speaking of Carney's trip. Lyndsey, what's your take? What do you think about how this went?
Well, I think that Carney's team obviously watches this show and listens to this radio show every Friday, because I'm pretty sure they basically did exactly what I called would happen, and that was survive, not get Zelensky'd, and call it a win. So yeah, I think that realistically, it's been interesting to watch sort of the outcome and how different either media personalities are taking it, et cetera. But, you know, I think you watch it, and I don't know what people were expecting as far as big announcements after it or something like that, but I think it was a good first meeting, and my expectations were pretty low, and it met them. So that's good.
I thought U.S. media coverage afterwards, both left and right, was quite kind of negative. That was kind of interesting to me in terms of how they perceived it. Tyler, what was your reaction?
I think I was just thinking about Lyndsey's comment about it kind of meeting her low expectations. I think we are too tough on them, right? It's hard to know in Washington today what works and what doesn't. We've seen world leaders take different approaches to these things. In my mind, the president saying what he wants for concessions from Canada's friendship is a good news story. I think clearly the prime minister has got his skeptics out there. I think that there's a lot of people probably listening to this show that are going to have a hard time giving Mark Carney credit for doing good things. But I think the country would be better off when we recognize when something good happens and when our leaders show good leadership, even when they're not of the same political stripe as we are. And I think Mark Carney showed good leadership this week, and it's positive, and we should acknowledge that.
Yeah, I had a few members of the audience that thought it was a train wreck and it was terrible and it was embarrassing. That wasn't my reaction. I
respectfully disagree with those audience members.
Yeah, well, I kind of do too. I thought it went. I thought it went well, to be honest with you. Kelvin, what's your opinion?
I think, well, we can be sure there's fair criticism of Carney for flip-flopping on the elbows up, friends off with America message that he had through the campaign. But I think in reality, and this is something that we talked about throughout the campaign, the facts of the matter state that 3/4 of Canada's exports go to the U.S. We have this integrated cultural relationship, societal relationship. This is what I think we were expecting, and I think he made his point about Canadian sovereignty, still maintained what looked like a friendly, functional relationship with the president. My biggest takeaway, further to what Tyler was saying about Trump saying that the concession he's looking for from Canada, is friendship, was that Trump actually seems to really like Mark Carney and highly respects him, maybe even admires him, wants to be friends with him. It kind of seemed like the White House released a video after the visit. You said, Shaun, that U.S. media was negative, but the White House social media was very positive. An epic video of Mark Carney and Trump hanging out at the White House and that kind of thing. So I don't know. To me, in general, that was maybe my biggest takeaway. Carney kind of did what he had to do. He got in his points about Canadian sovereignty. Trump spoke for, I think they said the Oval Office meeting with the press there, the reality TV with the press was like 33 minutes long, and Trump spoke for 30 minutes of it. Carney said what he needed to in his 3 minutes, and I think it went okay.
That was interesting. President Trump continued to refer to him as Mark, which is quite casual and informal, similar to Prime Minister Starmer yesterday referring to the president as Donald on numerous occasions on that press call, which I don't think I've ever heard that before. So I think there's two, and I thought one of the things that Carney didn't talk much, as you said, but he got in the line that he needed to. Hey, President Trump, you know real estate, and not all real estate's for sale, and the president acknowledged that, got his line in, which was really good, and even referred to Buckingham Palace. And we talked about this last week. Again, President Trump has a real affinity for the British monarchy for whatever reason. And that is a very smart play. It also probably is a little bit of a bit of a pathway into maybe why Trump does seem to like Carney. And as Jamieson Greer, USTR administrator, talked about secretary said last week, Carney is a man of substance. Again, this is all kind of connected. So hopefully it's an indication of where this goes from here. Tyler, you want to say something?
Yeah. I think the other thing that we need to get to acknowledge in Canada is that we can be critical for the Prime Minister only speaking 3 out of those 33 minutes, but we've just gone through a decade of a Prime Minister that talks a lot and says very little. Yeah. It's nice actually to have a Prime Minister that doesn't say much, but when he says something, he means it and it has an impact. And I think we saw that in the meeting with President Trump. We saw that in the press conference a week ago. We saw that in the press conference later in the day after the meeting with the president. This is a man that chooses his words. When asked, if he would enter into an agreement with the NDP, his answer was no. I got a tremendous amount of respect for a politician that kind of cuts the BS that we often hear from politicians and says what's there. And again, I think that makes it a lot easier to understand where he stands. And I think it makes it easier to understand where he's going. And I think we're all better off from that, of a man that isn't just substance from his background and his capacity, but when he communicates, he talks substantively. And that is such a difference from the last decade that we've had in this country.
Well, I kind of think that's more comfortable in that world we saw this week than some of the domestic politic conversations that we have seen. That's really where where his weakness is like, I'm interested to see what it's like in question period. I'll be really honest with you. Don't see him really excelling in that environment. He may prove me wrong, but what we saw this week, that's the world that he really, really thrives in.
And I tell you, Shaun, if I had to choose between someone that thrived in question period and someone that thrived in a meeting with the U.S. president, my money's on thriving with the U.S. president every day of the week.
I wasn't making that judgment. I'm just telling you where his weakness lies, and it's probably in some of the actually being the politician part of the job. So, we got a lot to cover. Hey, I got an email here from Paul. And I had asked all the farmers yesterday on the Farm Rapid Fire what they thought about Carney's appearance. And he said, well, I too believe Carney did well in the meeting. I believe it is more the result of him being prepared by our government bureaucrats in Washington and in Ottawa. I believe whoever is the prime minister, blue or red, we have excellent coaches in the background that are working on behalf of citizens of Canada. Thanks for the email, Paul. I really wish those same advisors would have been there when the Prime Minister dressed up in India and did the dancing. Where were they on that day? That was, yeah.
They were there. They might not have been listened to.
Okay. Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this. Every farmer defines success differently, and every farm has its own unique challenges. Corteva Biologicals is partnering with Canadian farmers for their success, offering unique solutions that improve and protect crops from start to finish, based on each field's needs. Using proven, predictable solutions across all crop stages, Corteva Biologicals helps build healthy, productive, and profitable farms. Corteva Biologicals, we're growing together.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Hope you're enjoying yourself here on this, last day of the work week for the office jockeys. But for a lot of farmers, they are going to be out and about over the weekend here trying to get this crop in. Lyndsey's going to be lambing. That's underway, so there's a lot of livestocking going on. Hey, this segment's brought to you by Ag Expert. Deep in the fields and deep in the data to back up your decisions on the farm. Get started at agexpert.ca. The other piece of insight that I forgot to mention in the prior segment was in talking to U.S. farm groups this week, still an open, I would say like the story to be written, but initially some very positive responses about Prime Minister Carney from U.S. farm groups. Now, a lot of that is in comparison to the prior prime minister, and being like, hey, there's like, one CEO said to me, low bar. But definitely a positive response. So pass on that insight as well. Cabinet, Kelvin, you wrote a story for RealAgriculture.com. We decided last week that you had to be a goalie to be the ag minister. What can you tell us about the rest of cabinet?
Well, we are waiting to see what message Carney sends to Canadians and to our ag industry, depending on who he puts in cabinet. Is it going to be more of the same when it comes to some of the cabinet ministers that we became familiar with under Justin Trudeau? Or is he going to put some new people in there? And what's the mix going to be? And I think on agriculture, Cody Blois is, as we've said the last couple of weeks, is the front runner, although there are some factors working against him, including geographic distribution. If Shaun Fraser, who was in cabinet under Trudeau, is also selected to cabinet, that would mean potentially 2 cabinet ministers from Nova Scotia in what is supposed to be a smaller Carney cabinet. Gender balance is also something that Carney has committed to, so those factors potentially working against him. And also, I think we also have to remember that Quebec, there are more Liberal seats in Quebec under Mark Carney right now than there were at any point under Justin Trudeau. And so Quebecers are going to expect some representation in cabinet, and where is that going to be? And could agriculture potentially, there's a potential argument you can make there too, that somebody from Quebec could be appointed as our ag minister. And one name that comes to mind there that at least is familiar to us is Marianne Dandurand, who was the press secretary for Marie-Claude Bibeau in Juan Bibeau's riding after Bibeau decided to leave federal politics. And so she would at least have had some firsthand experience working in the ag minister's office. Other than that, we don't have a lot of detail as to other potential ag minister candidates. Of course, Blois is atop the list, and rest of cabinet, we'll have to see whether people like Stephen Guilbeault, Quebecers apparently still love Stephen Guilbeault, even though he's quite controversial and polarizing and unliked in Western Canada. What's his place in cabinet, and where else does Quebec representation get do people get appointed under that premise, and what does that mean for Western Canadian representation and the sentiment in Western Canada?
Yeah, but
for next week.
Former Conservative cabinet member James Moore was on CBC yesterday, and I heard him say they need to park Wilkinson and Guilbeault in the trees. Like, have them nowhere near environment, energy. Like, if Carney is really serious about this stuff, if he's really serious about, national unity and, hey, we're going to build, we're going to get a nation building and all this kind of stuff, having either of those two near either of those files, there's the first test for him.
Yeah, that's the big, some of those are the messages that whoever he puts in cabinet, that's the message that's going to be sent or not sent next week.
I heard one analyst say, Tyler, that expect a third of the people to be new, and the people that are staying, 50% of them to have different roles, was kind of the shakeout. What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. I mean, lots of people in Ottawa like to gossip and speculate about these things, and you hear wildly different speculation about where things are going and the level of change. It does seem like there's this general sense that the change will be much more significant than it was in his first go round, where he left senior people in place, largely left that US team in place, that there may be changes that are there. But it's a big unknown. The caucus has changed substantially. There are different pressures there. We know cabinet's going to be bigger, kind of 30 people rather than 23, I think seems to be the number that gets kicked around. But where that goes, what that means, it's hard to know. I will say to something that Kelvin said earlier, I'm not sure that time in a minister's office, the agriculture minister's office, is all that great of a qualification to be agriculture minister. Having spent some time in that office myself, I'm not sure that would really put me there. I hope that if it's not Cody Blois, it's someone that also has that same support connection with the Prime Minister. And again, I think I've said this before on the show, I'm not so convinced that it needs to be somebody from the sector. What we really need is somebody that's got the ear of the Prime Minister. I think Cody Blois did. But hopefully he'll be back. I mean, his 1 week as minister did more than what we saw that ag portfolio do in years.
Well, what do you do with Melanie Jolie?
I don't think she's. Yeah, I think she's switching. Go ahead, Tyler. But based on her interview yesterday, it didn't sound like she'd be in the same position. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. I've been using that as kind of like the $1 million question around how much change there is whether or not Jolie gets moved out of foreign affairs. So heaven only knows. Johnny McDonald used to say when he would check into a hotel that he would fill his occupation in as cabinet maker. Making a cabinet is one of the biggest, toughest jobs that the Prime Minister has to do. It has such lasting consequences. Not only is it important who's there, it's important to recognize that Carney has talked about going back to kind of how things were under the Chrétien era, where it was more of a cabinet by, not committee, but like more empowered ministers. Trudeau, by all accounts, was very concentrated. His office made decisions on these things. We're supposed to see more empowered ministers. And so it really will matter who he puts where. And I actually think it's a good thing that he's taken kind of an extra week to appoint this cabinet. Hopefully it's a sign that there's good changes coming.
Yeah, all of a sudden, if that's the case, if we're going to decentralize, then boy, who gets some of those spots, Lyndsey, becomes absolutely critical. What are your thoughts?
So, well, absolutely. And I think, to Tyler's point, taking the time to get this right, I think is really important. Realistically, Carney's first cabinet really wasn't, the making of a cabinet. It was a placeholder until there was an election. I mean, and it needed to happen for the continuity of government, but realistically, I don't think that was, him putting a stamp on anything. To Kelvin's opinion column that's on the site, highly recommend it. Give it a read, because it does really outline sort of, the importance of deciding on who gets these portfolios, and exactly that, these will be the ministers in place that are going to put forward the change that Carney says he's going to be doing, and what he really campaigned on, right, is that, and federally and in this last election, it was, yes, we're still the Liberals, but yes, we're different. So this will have to be, or this should be at least a signal as to just how different the Carney government will be from Trudeau.
To bring it back to an agriculture lens, or focusing specifically on ag and what it means for farmers and farm groups, I think we are also going to have to see who the voices of agriculture are, who the MPs are that care about agricultural issues. We know Cody Blois is one, but there's a lot of people that left federal politics that have been involved in agriculture for a long time in this election. We had Marie-Claude Bibeau, Lawrence McCauley, of course, the two former ag ministers, both not run again, Francis Drouin, Lloyd Longfield are a couple Liberal MPs who would meet with farm groups and raise agriculture-related issues in the House of Commons and in committee, and they're not there anymore. So I'm curious who the voices of agriculture in that Liberal caucus, that broader in those caucus meetings and in cabinet, will be in this government as well.
Blois can't do it all on his own.
That's right.
No, and the Liberals that were elected in Western Canada don't have a lot of connections to agriculture background or experience, ties to agriculture and farming either. So that's and again, to Tyler's point, that may not matter, especially if geographic representation is more important than what their background is. But yeah, I'm curious as to who picks up that the role, and if anybody picks up that role in caucus to support Blois on it.
Tyler?
And I think it's something that Kelvin touched on something. There are more Liberal voices in Western Canada now than there were before. For all of the talk about Western alienation, and we can get into the separation piece, there are more Liberal caucus members after the election. We've got Liberal MPs and across the north. We've got Liberal MPs.
It doesn't take much to triple a number. When it's like, come on.
But again, Shaun, this is, I think we like to kind of downplay the fact that more Western Canadians voted Liberal this time than did last time, right? And that's important. I think it sends a signal. And I think you'll see the Prime Minister take this more seriously when it comes to appointing that cabinet and handing these jobs.
We will see. I really truly believe. What do you do with Wilkinson and Guilbeault? Mm-hmm. That's if you want to know where Alberta's looking, it won't be like, do we get a cabinet member from Alberta? What do we do with those two guys?
I think Carney understands that. They won't be in cabinet. They won't have serious influential economic roles in cabinet, but it's a matter of who gets chosen instead of them, and if they have the same beliefs and policies and ideology.
Guilbeault was his Quebec advisor. Just saying.
And he is apparently popular in the province still. So it's, it is a big question mark.
Make him the Minister of Quebec Relations then or something.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Why not?
Cool. Okay. Managed. Done.
Again, as the Quebecer on the panel, I'll just say that again, it's one thing to be popular. It's not just that he's popular in Quebec. The Liberal Party absorbed the NDP effectively this time. There's all of these kind of left-leaning Canadians that had voted for him. I think that that's less of a Quebec issue. And how does the Prime Minister now hold on to this kind of bigger coalition that he's got? But the consensus across the country has clearly changed on energy issues. Across the country, including in Quebec, there's more support for pipelines and energy development. I think the Prime Minister's been pretty clear in his conversations with Smith and Moe. Both of them have acknowledged the change in tone from the Prime Minister, and so I expect that we will see a difference here.
Action.
Absolutely.
Easy to talk. That's what Canadians are good at. Let's get to the action part. of this equation. Hey, at Alliance Seed, every seed starts the story of your success, and our top-performing seed varieties are tailored to meet the unique challenges of your farm. Discover the Alliance difference at allianceseed.com. We still got more to talk about. The U.S.-UK trade deal. What does that mean for Canada as it tries to negotiate the trade under Carney? May talk about Alberta separation and what happened there this week. What does that mean for agriculture? I don't know, we probably got a bonus segment too. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Hey, make sure this weekend you go to realagriculture.com and keep up to date with all the latest, greatest things that are happening, providing you with that insight all about the industry of agriculture. And also Monday night, Lyndsey, what's on the Agronomist Monday night?
Oh, goodness. We are going to talk about canola establishment.
Ooh.
So, yeah, we've got a great lineup. Yeah, it is super important. So Jack Payne, Chris Mancher are going to join me. And, yeah, we're going to talk about getting that seed in the ground, trying to keep those seeds alive so that they become seedlings, and then keeping those seedlings alive. So, yeah, it's going to be a gooder.
Make sure you talk about the dryness of all of that and do that through droughty, brutal.
Do not put it 3 inches in the ground, everybody.
That Mother Nature, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
When I ever meet her. Go ahead, Tyler.
I just want to give a shout out to last Monday's Agronomist, available on YouTube that people should watch. For those of us on the livestock side of agriculture, pasture and forage, doesn't often get the attention that it deserves. So a big shout out to Lyndsey and team.
Thank you.
For talking about how to rejuvenate pasture. So I thought it was a great episode and everybody should check that out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tyler.
Did you talk about like stocking rates and things like that, Lyndsey? Or
so many things. You're going to have to check it out. It's as Tyler said, it's on YouTube, and all sorts of things. But really, that was a key part. I had Christine O'Reilly and Grant Lestuka on, and one of the key points, which I thought was really great, was that it's your management is like 40% of the persistence of your stand. Meaning that, the decisions you make on things like stocking density, the length of time the animals are out there, when you rotate back to it, all those sorts of things have just as much impact as things like the species you choose and fertility, etc. So there's a lot you can do as the person making the decisions. And yeah, so it was cool.
I have walked pasture with Grant Lestuka on his farm.
You have.
I have.
It's, there's even video evidence of such things. Yeah. Great.
Hey, understanding the challenges you face, Nutrient Ag Solutions works with you to find the right solution every time. Nutrient Ag Solutions is one partner, all in. Visit nutrientagsolutions.ca to learn how their offerings work together to support your operation. Of course, probably you can go to nutrientagsolutions.com for our American listeners. Probably anybody can do that, and they just redirects no matter where you're coming from, I would imagine. But thanks, Nutrient, for supporting Real Ag Radio. Okay, let's talk trade. Kelvin, this weekend in Geneva, I've had a couple friends that have lived in Geneva. Wonderful city. I've been there once for 2 days, a long time ago. The U.S. and China are going to be talking trade this weekend. We're just hoping for de-escalation and all of the trade rhetoric. Is that what we're looking for, Kelvin?
I think so, yeah, and doesn't sound like it's going to be anything like back friends on again type situation, but Trump's talking 80% tariff reduction to 80% tariff, which effectively, when you add it to some of the others that are still in effect, it's probably still at kind of embargo type levels. when it comes to trade with China. But we're definitely starting to see more evidence in both the Chinese economy, which is tough to always get a handle on, and of course in the U.S. when it comes to the impact of these tariffs on the impact on container movement and shipping and that type of thing, port activity. A lot of the metrics showing signs of trouble on the horizon there, or if it's not already hitting.
Lyndsey, how about you?
Well, so, I mean, it's interesting from the Canadian perspective because, and I know we're going to talk about the US-UK deal as well, but realistically, so we had a good meeting earlier this week, with our Prime Minister and the US, but we are, everything that happens between the US and China eventually trickles down to what happens here in Canada. Absolutely. And what happens with our, right? So it is one of those, I feel like we're watching and hoping for really good things because it does impact us, but we have zero control on what happens on these things. So, but I think it's really important, and we hope for de-escalation, and we'll see. It seems like this week is one that the U.S. really wants good news to bring back to its people. So perhaps that's something that they'll work out and figure out. We'll see. I don't have super high hopes, but watching, of course, very closely on what impact this may have, of course, on us eventually.
I'm optimistic about this one for whatever reason, based on, I've talked to nobody that's going to be there, but I think this weekend is one of China asking, okay, what do you want? And the U.S. saying, here's what we need. And then some clarity. I think this weekend is just about clarity, and that could be clarity that, hey, tariffs are staying in place and we're going to stay at this point, or there's going to be a rollout of here's what these talks are going to look like, but at least some calm clarity in regards to regarding U.S. and China. And Tyler is going to be a fly in that ointment, and he wants to see trouble. So, Tyler, what do you say?
No, Shaun, I completely agree with you. I'm very optimistic about this weekend because I think it will be another example of how the U.S. just keeps walking back these extreme positions that it takes that serves no one's interest. They've done it before on the tariffs. They've done it before. And almost every tariff situation that the president has gone forward, they've had to walk back. They walked back on auto manufacturers. They walked back on cell phone manufacturers. And I know that it's very popular in the U.S. to kind of praise these big accomplishments, but often really all that they are is the U.S. making concessions from the relatively extreme trade positions it's taken before, with very little to gain at the end of the day. I mean, I don't quite understand this strong desire to punish the U.S. economy the way the U.S. administration seems to be doing it too. But hopefully, some cooler heads will prevail and they will walk back from the crazy things that they're doing. So again, I agree with you, Shaun. I'm optimistic because the U.S. hasn't shown much backbone on these trade efforts at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, I guess that's a good thing. Would be better if we avoided.
I think from an agriculture perspective, there's a major opportunity here to increase. If talking to U.S. farm groups this week, there is a lot of concern about what has happened to the purchase of pork, beef, sorghum, ethanol, soybeans. I can't remember if I mentioned that one or not. So I think that's what from a farm group perspective, and for U.S. farmers and ranchers, that's really where all eyes are. Obviously, there's digital taxes, and there's intellectual property is getting a little less of the headline in this case. But for U.S. exports, I think that's where a lot of the attention is.
But that's one of the problems that we've got, Shaun, is that I think by and large, people agree the Trump administration has diagnosed a lot of the right problems. The problem is their solutions don't actually fix them. If we wanted to fix things with China, if we wanted a durable, lasting change, what the U.S. should be doing is building alliances around the rest of the world. If the United States could get all of North America, could get Europe, could get other parts of Asia together and take a coordinated approach to China, that could deliver lasting change that would benefit U.S. farmers. But instead, what the U.S. approach has done is actually pushed Europe closer to China at the end of the day and risks producing no meaningful change. So yes, again, I think that an agreement this weekend will make things better from the bad situation that the U.S. put it in when it did what it did. But the better situation would have been a more thoughtful, coordinated approach that allowed the world to come together, because the US can't just do this on its own, allowed the world to come together to counter some of the wrong things that China is doing. But Shaun, that's not what the administration's doing, and it's really unfortunate.
Okay, but that's not what either side of the aisle wants them to do. You think back to 2016, they withdrew from the TPP or the CPTPP, whatever we're going to call it. That was a popular decision on both sides of the aisle. So there is not a desire to go about this multilateral from Democrats or Republicans. So I think we need to sort of modernize our understanding of what's at work here from a U.S. Voter perspective. They don't want that. They don't want to be working with Europe against China. They want to tackle that bilaterally on their own, right or wrong or whatever.
They want
that right. Yeah.
No, and that's just it. Like and Shaun, you were in Washington this week getting some great interviews, and I listened through them, and we've posted them on Real Agriculture, and when it came to pork, and when it comes to, like, honestly, they spell out they want the benefits that are in the CPTPP, but they got out of it. So it's like, so exactly that, right? So it's like, it's not so much that they don't want those benefits, they just didn't want the parameters that deal has. So it is like, I understand the U.S. perspective, but as the other countries, or as Canada, as somebody else, like, there's a reason that we stayed in these deals, because they do have benefits, and the U.S. could have had said benefits.
But on that one, similar to what's going on in Canada right now, how people are saying that, hey, autos drive with all the strategy. That's the exact same thing when it came to the TPP. It had to do, a lot of it had to do with autos, the removal.
Can I jump in with two quick comments on the last couple minutes of discussion here? I would say, first of all, is it not concerning that the U.S. administration, Trump 1.0 and now Trump 2.0, is increasingly making these centralized, government-controlled one-off sales deals and selling them as trade agreements with China, with the UK is another example this week. Isn't this the opposite of free markets and individual liberty and the ability of entrepreneurs to pursue open markets, that kind of thing, where supply and demand dictate the market? To me, this is the opposite of what America has traditionally stood for. That's comment one. And comment two, is there opportunity if the temperature drops a bit here between China and the U.S. this weekend, is there a window here for Mark Carney to do something on EV tariffs to get China to drop the tariffs on Canadian canola products, peas, seafood, pork, so on?
I'm taking the no on that one.
That Carney will do anything?
No, I don't think he's going to be afforded the opportunity to. They're staying.
And again, I think because I think that is a coordinated approach on EV tariffs between North America and Europe is a good example. If you really do want to tackle the China problem, that's how you tackle it. You have to understand there are consequences. That is what that is. But that idea of a coordinated approach where the coalition of the willing maintains tariffs against China is part of what's needed to reset that.
Yeah. I think, Kelvin, your assessment in terms of not the free market, correct, but not what they're looking for. This is how they would define fair trade versus free trade. And if you look at the UK agreement this week, there's more tariff rate quotas, like there's more controlled. Well, we're going to allow some of your products in, but not in full entirety. This is managed trade. Yeah. This is how they're viewing it. So
this is what China, Russia, countries like that do, and what a lot of European countries do, and what the U.S. is critical of European countries for doing.
This is you told us to read the textbook. We read the textbook, and this is what they're doing. There should be no shocks here. Hey, the rest of it has to be in the bonus. I'm sorry. Hey, everybody, if you do have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture, and Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Chat again next week. Cheers, everybody. Okay, now we're in the bonus, so this is where anything can happen. I'm terrified of where this is going to go. I did say it on the air And thanks everybody for downloading the RealAg Radio podcast. We do appreciate it. Continue to tell your friends, your neighbors, enemies, anybody interested in agriculture. Why not? I did find it interesting this week about how I mentioned about how the U.S. farm groups had a real positive, at least initially here, a view of Carney. The other signal that I forgot to mention on the air, a signal for me too is in talking to a lot of the U.S. farm groups, we're past the remember in the NAFTA negotiations in the first Trump administration, or even 2 months ago. There was a lot of, hey, how important trade is with Canada. This is an integrated supply chain. No one's talking about it. I honestly think at this point, we're more worried about this than even some of the U.S. farm groups are, where there is the integrated supply chains. I think there's a bit of a signal there that I think it's going to be okay. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but that was kind of what I picked up this week in D.C.
Shaun, again, there's good reason to think that it's going to be okay. The Americans have backed down on pretty well everything that they've tried to do, right? That's part of the problem, I think, for Carney and the government that wants to deliver change now is that the threat of U.S. action should have motivated drastic change. It is probably the kick in the butt that this country needed to do things differently. So I think that the big question is, if that kick of the butt's not coming, how far is Canada actually willing to go to do things differently? How committed actually are we to building pipelines, to serious change on how the government works in Ottawa? Again, I hope it's still there. The Prime Minister is talking as if he's pretty serious about it. But if we don't face that existential crisis, is the population going to give him the support that it needs to actually do it? I don't know.
We're going to be more integrated when it's all over. Kelvin, go ahead.
To me, the UK-US trade deal announced this week is further supporting evidence to your argument too, Shaun, in terms of there's been this tremendous amount of hype about this massive deal that the US managed to sign with the UK, and yet when we look at the beef market access, they've got the same conditions that Canada's been dealing with, and the same roadblocks when it comes to hormone treatment and carcass wash criteria and that type of thing, and so I think this supports what both you and Tyler have said here in terms of this is probably a sign for Canada that we maybe shouldn't be as nervous as we have been about major change being expected or pushed on us by the U.S. administration.
If I'm supply management, I like what I saw to that U.S.-UK trade agreement. It shows they're more concerned about the tariff loads than they are about dealing with some of the technicals and the non-tariff trade barriers. We've been hearing about this going back to the fall. U.S. dairy groups, saying our ask is meet the U.S. definition of those TRQ allocations, and if you overlay that over what we saw this week out of this U.S.-UK trade deal, fits right in line with that.
They may not like the Globe and Mail editorial today, though, that talking about the need to deliver real serious change talks about needing to get rid of, what does it say? But Canada's economy needs to be remade in a dramatic and unapologetic way, which I think a lot of us agree with. Then goes on to say, it's I'm going to have a hard time with this word. Parochialism, best expressed by interprovincial trade barriers and supply management, needs to be replaced by a more daring and international vision. So at a high level, hard to disagree with that statement, but I bet a lot of people are going to bristle about the inclusion of supply management in it.
Tyler, can you spell that for all of us at home? That's quite the...
I'm even going to...
I don't use
No, we're not even going to use it again.
Yeah,
no,
no.
exactly. Yeah, no thanks.
My vocabulary is not that expansive, Lyndsey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was going to say it's a great way to alienate your readers is to use words like that. Anyway, Kelvin, go ahead.
We look at broader economic indicators in Canada, things aren't all that rosy either in terms of the status quo. When we look at GDP per capita and those metrics, productivity that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And today we saw jobs numbers as well that were disguisingly positive. They show, unemployment rose to 6.9%, and the number of jobs was up slightly, but it was largely due to temporary public administration jobs associated with the federal election taking place last month. If you look at, if you take those jobs out of it, it actually would have been a decrease in employment by 30,000, largely, which is a large indicator that the trade war is actually hitting our manufacturing sector in Canada. And so to me, there is still impetus there for Carney and for the provinces, the premiers to make some changes to how things work in our national economy to address some of these trends that have been there for even before the Trump administration came in back in January.
And I think that there's really something interesting to be said for this kind of only Nixon can go to China dynamic, right? Like Carney will be able to do things that Pierre Poilievre couldn't without provoking a significant backlash. Like Carney, as a liberal, may actually be able to get that pipeline built across the country that Poilievre couldn't. Carney, as a liberal, may be able to drastically reform the federal civil service in ways that Poilievre couldn't without causing a big fight. So it's going to be really interesting to see how far he can go with that.
Yeah, he's sure talking a big game when it comes to pipelines.
He's holding a first minister's meeting in Saskatoon. I mean, like this is, I know these are little things, but like I think that at a certain point in time, people need to take the man, take yes as an answer, and work towards it and work part of it. But what doesn't help anybody in this country is a strong, serious commitment from Canadians in the election to build pipelines and to do the things that need to bring the country closer together, and have the Alberta Premier go off recklessly, encouraging separation in the province in a way that is only going to harm Alberta and the rest of the country. They need to learn some from the history of Quebec. Quebec is worse off because of its separatist movements over the decades. Montreal was hollowed out in the 70s because of those efforts. And the damage that could get done to Calgary and all of those businesses that are there over the next decade as Smith fans the flame of separation at a time when the federal government seems to be very seriously willing to work towards fixing things that have been broken for 10 years. She's going to do far more damage to this than
action. I think it.
But Shaun,
Carney talking about doing like all these great nation building things the next 5 years. We've been through this. Do it. And like I think this. Yeah, but forget about the Americans. That's not our biggest problem. As we've been saying on this show, his biggest problem is national unity. Yes. It is national unity. And if I was Smith, I wouldn't have done what I think, she needs to learn from David Cameron, and, you entertain stuff. There's a saying, F around and find out. And I think one of the differences between Alberta and Quebec is Alberta will just do it. Like that is the difference here. Alberta will, like, Quebec threatens and uses it for leverage. I'm a little concerned that if this progresses, it will happen. In fact, this was my prediction on the Vance Crowe podcast. This could happen if things don't change. Hopefully Carney is serious about what he's promising.
But Shaun, Smith should have said, I'm going to give Carney a year. Mm-hmm. And she didn't, right?
Or something along those lines.
Didn't give him a week without inflaming the rhetoric. Like, that is
the last 10 years has sucked.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But Parliament starts sitting in 2 weeks, or not quite, right? Or just over, whatever. Like, to Tyler's point, and I completely agree, is that this is an incredibly serious issue. But as the Premier, well, she may not be actively promoting it. She is keeping everything going and keeping that hope there, and maybe even encouraging it, etc., sort of in a behind the scenes way. And I completely understand that from the perspective of the West of saying, no, we need to see action. Okay, so yes, put a timeline in place, but I mean, Parliament's not even sitting yet. We don't even have a cabinet yet. So to go ahead and be like, oh, well, we're going to move towards having this, succession plan, when like the government hasn't even stepped in to start making some of these decisions, like, come on. Yes, I think hold the government to account and say, what are you going to do? But you have to at least give them the opportunity.
No, so why? I think
because you can't do anything until you're in government and actually making laws.
I think the positive of this is a shot across the bow to Carney and saying, like, move. Like, no. if you said, you know what, we're going to give him a year and we're going to see how this works out, that's a very Canadian way of approaching this. And I think this is a good shot across. If there's a positive from this, is get to work.
Sure. No. Okay. But that's so open-ended that what's Alberta's responsibility to say, like, okay, yes, these are the things we want and this is what we like and here's progress. You can't have some arbitrary, like, do it or else and have no parameters as to when or why or who's going to do what. That's completely irresponsible. You have to have some sort of parameters to actually meet, or else how do you know it's been successful? So, like, yeah, you can't just be like, no, come on, you have to shit or get off the pot. Where's the pot? Where's the shit? Come on, you have to have some parameters.
So some of the first memories I have are from the Quebec referendum in '95. This is it. When you have to sit up and you watch the needle go back and forth on the night that those votes get counted, and that there's a risk that the country is going to get torn apart. That again, in our case, living in Western Quebec, we probably would have had to move. It's hard to imagine what that would have done, the damage that would have caused. Again, never mind the economic harm that was caused over 40 years as businesses went somewhere else. It's one thing to say this is shots across the bow, but like this is not something that you should use. But guys, we already
have in Calgary, we have businesses going elsewhere because this is not a place to invest in the resource industry because of the shenanigans and bullshit policy of a government for the past 10 years. They're already leaving.
The point. Threatening the future of the country, Shaun, is not something that you should throw around lightly. And let's be clear, there's certainly a political element for Smith as she tries to maintain control of her party that's driving this. It is unfortunate and it's damaging, and I don't see how this makes life any better for anybody in Alberta to be playing games like this. I think it's crazy.
I had a political analyst friend in Alberta tell me earlier this week that it totally makes sense that she had to do this because if she didn't, her future, done. She's
Jason
out.
Kenney.
What's that?
He's worried about getting the Jason Kenney treatment.
Yes, absolutely. She's saving her own bacon here politically.
And she's putting the future of her province and the country behind her own bacon. And that's unfortunate. And that's too bad. Well, she's got bigger issues she should be working with.
Come on. What bloody politician doesn't think about things in that manner?
I think that there's lots of politics. I mean, so that's part of the problem with politics today, Shaun, is that we don't hold our politicians to a high enough standard. Let's be a good example. Chrystia Freeland stepped out of cabinet, took down Trudeau as prime minister, and is now out effectively in the wilderness, right? Like there are some examples of this, maybe not in kind of the best ways that we would like, but we should, just because politicians are not
wait a minute before. So where was she on the Jody Wilson-Raybould situation? Like before we put her on a freaking top.
I'm not putting her on a pedestal, but I'm saying that we need to do a better job holding our politicians to account, holding them to a higher standard, and catering to a politician fanning the flames of separation today is not doing the right thing. You may be able to defend this, Shaun. I think that's unacceptable. I think that's dangerous. We should not mess around. We should not toy with that.
You're putting words in my mouth.
Across the country
should
be holding you to account for you fanning the flames, saying that this is a legitimate thing.
Fanning the flames. Oh, now I'm fanning the flames.
You're saying it's a legitimate thing. Let's take some shots across the bow.
I'm giving you examples of why she has support about doing this. I think you need to understand better from your spot in Quebec.
I understand better.
How Albertans feel.
And so I actually think this is on Albertans. This is on Albertans to sit with and recognize. And so here's what I hope actually does happen. I hope Carney recognizes the incredible level of feelings on Alberta's perspective of how they've been left out, of how they've been actively worked against by the federal government. Yeah. It's not just Western alienation. Like, we really well and truly have to recognize and not just Alberta, but realistically, Alberta has had more than its fair share of having to go head to head with a federal government that was actively working against it as a province. Totally get that. So we've got a new prime minister that has made commitments to essentially not do that, and we have to wait and see what that's going to be. It's not going to happen in a day. We have to actually have a parliament that sits. But in the meantime, we have to actually have Albertans that recognize what an actual like separation would mean. And it is not all sunshine and rainbows, and make the case of how you want to see things. I am someone who very much appreciates what is the solution going forward. So we all know what the problem is. So what's the solution going forward, and then work together on it. My fear is that we get caught up in all the rhetoric and the social media stuff and all the stuff that is just, it has nothing to do with facts. It all has to do with feelings, and it doesn't actually put reality in its place to actually talk about how do we want to see this moving forward? What do we want that's best for Alberta and best for Canada? Because frankly, we can all win on this, but everyone has to be willing to actually sit down and work it out. And so while we can point fingers at Smith for whatever she said and is saying and is fanning the flames, ultimately Albertans need to recognize that, taking their ball and going home has incredible repercussions for them too, and as does the status quo. So what's the path forward? What does that look like? Right? And not make it all about, it's an all or nothing, whatever. I want to see like Carney actually making plans and taking action. Yes. But we also need to see that Alberta is going to allow him, because that's the other thing, is that there's a huge portion of the population, and I talk to them quite often, that it won't matter what he does. He's a Liberal, and they're not going to hear it. And that can't work either if we're actually going to get past this. So there has to be that too.
Yeah. I don't believe that Smith is a separatist. Maybe...
I don't know what she is, I'll be honest.
Oh, she's very much a libertarian. We know that for sure. And that, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that she's encouraging separatism?
I wouldn't by lowering the signups. What do you call that?
Yeah. For the referendum.
Signatures, whatever.
The signatures, yes.
Yeah.
I think that is a mistake, and I've used the David Cameron reference that if you be careful. Like, so, and this gets into the provincial politics of it, but be careful, because if you don't want it to if you don't want it to happen, be careful with what lowering the bar on all this, because again, I truly believe the difference between Alberta and Quebec is Alberta is a go province, and it will go. And when I mean go, I mean action. It is a different mentality than Quebec is, and there's a different mentality between Alberta conservatives and Ontario conservatives. Like, Alberta conservatism is different, and it won't take much of an inspirational leader to put a prop under. I see it in my friend groups. People that would have never voted to potentially even entertain this 5 years ago are like, honestly, I think we should vote and figure it out.
Shaun, do you think that she's dangerous?
In what way?
For the Alberta economy?
No.
Do you think that she will do harm to the country?
Well, it would be harm to the country. And yes, it would overall as a Canadian in totality. Yes, it would be harmful if Alberta left. I have major concerns about Alberta leaving, by the way.
Do you think it will be harmful for Alberta leaving?
I think that's a way too open-ended question. That is there's a wide scale.
But that is ultimately the question that would be put in front of Alberta. Do you think you will be better off outside of Canada than inside of Canada? Again, we have this issue in Quebec, right? They play around with words and language and questions to try and make it easier for people to say yes. But at the end of the day, the question is, do you think you will be better off outside the country than inside the country?
I have concerns we will not be. Yeah, I have concerns. I do. But I'm just telling you, like, this isn't just a bunch of frickin' nutballs in the back 40 saying, hey, we need to separate. These are, I look at my group text of friends. These are legitimate, successful business people that are tired and sick of this. Like, this is, like, I think a lot of times if you watch CBC Power and Politics, this gets positioned as this is a whole bunch of Looney Tune Trump MAGA fans. And that is not the case, you guys.
And again, I understand that, and I get it. And again, I have friends in Alberta that think that this way too. But it is not helpful, Shaun, when we do not have honest conversations. That if part of the concern is that we can't get pipelines built in this country, you know what will not get pipelines built in this country? Alberta leaving and forming its own.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's like, we need to have an honest conversation about these things. So you can be concerned about the situation, but we need to have an honest conversation about what the problem is and what the solutions are. And the solutions are better off for Alberta when it's part of a country where it can work together, where we can find solutions to help get that oil to market.
Well, then let's start the working together part, because they've been
That's exactly what I said.
for a long time.
That is why Carney is going.
Let's continue with the transfer payments. We're good.
That's why Carney is going to Saskatoon to hold the first minister's meeting, right? Like this is. I think that again we underestimate. This is an example, though.
Hooray! And he's showing he's intelligent because he's not having it in January in Saskatoon, because that would be foolish. Saskatoon is a beautiful city in the summertime, but this shows how low our bar is. That we're success. Or a really positive thing is we're having a meeting in Saskatchewan.
Shaun, the man was elected 2 weeks ago as prime minister. Again, I think that there's like some wildly crazy expectations. Like this is hard. This is hard work governing a country. You don't change the country on
especially
a dime.
This one. Managing confederation and all of these regional differences. This is an immensely hard job. This is not easy. This is
and it's made even worse when you've got a premier of a province.
Okay, hold on.
Standing in the way of
yesterday, leader of the bloc. Well, what I would do is I would just first say that I'm a okay. Well, we got all of our fingers pointed at Alberta. Let's talk about what he said this week in Quebec.
So, Shaun, I think that's great. Let's be clear. You are equating Daniel Smith with the leader of the bloc. I think that that's a very accurate, reasonable thing to do. If you
let's make excuses.
If you were putting Smith in the same bucket as Yves-François Blanchet, sure, that's great.
This is exactly why people are frustrated right here. It's okay for that. It's okay for all of that to happen.
No, it is bad for both of them, Shaun. Bad for both of them. I would not use Yves-François Blanchet as a justification to do anything in this country. But if that's what Alberta separatists have resulted to, is he's doing it, so we should get to do it too, we're doomed.
Or Premier Ford, who I think does a fantastic job in U.S. television, by the way, and he did again on Tuesday on Fox. He did a great job. We all need to just work together and hear each other. We need to work. We need to be more a more collective Canada and working together. Meanwhile, this is the same guy that thought we should put an export tax on oil. So,
who did put an export tax on his own electricity. Again, he was willing to put his money where his mouth is. Again, all I'm saying is let's give Carney and the government time to actually get things done. That's what we need. We need results. We don't need foot stomping, fit throwing. We need serious people, serious leaders, serious action, and serious results.
What I want to know is why the hell Heppner's been so quiet through all this. And I didn't want to talk about this for 20 minutes because there was other things to talk about.
I'm just trying to figure out if I have to mark that this is explicit content on YouTube because we use the SHIT word several times. No. Anyway, Kelvin, go ahead.
I think we should cut this and start a new series called RealAg Debate Club or something like that.
It's a great idea. Maybe it won't be the bonus segment.
And so I just want to be clear that if we're on a debate club, I'm on the side of Canada and Shaun's on the side of separation.
No,
let's be clear where we stand on these things.
Kelvin's the moderator. He gets to decide. And now Shaun needs to argue that Canada is better together.
No.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about the fact that the Bloc, why are they a federal party? That shouldn't even be allowed. We haven't even had that conversation.
On all these panels, on political panels, on TV, why is the NDP there?
Mm.
Who cares? That's like having somebody from the Greens on the panel.
Sometimes they are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. And, yeah.
They shouldn't be there. Who cares?
Well, but the Bloc shouldn't be on a federal level either. They shouldn't be part of the debate. They represent one province that doesn't even want to be part of Confederation. Why is the Bloc allowed?
They got more votes than the NDP did in the elections.
They did. Exactly. So why is the NDP there? Yeah.
I just don't want people to leave.
It's a mess.
Outside, because I think if for the Alberta audience, they understand what I'm saying because I'm speaking Albertan. For other parts of the country, I don't want you to leave with Tyler's framing of this, that in any shape or form, I am not for Canada. I get enough accusations of crap like that. That is not what I'm saying. I want that to be very much on the record. That is not what I'm saying.
So, Shaun, why don't we give you the last word to end on a note that is a positive rallying cry for fellow Albertans about the need and benefit of staying in Canada.
No, I think that
and
I think
why it's
no.
better.
I think the message is for is very much the Prime Minister can put this fire out. I truly believe that. And if he is true to his word and he is going to act fast, which is again working against Canadian culture. Canadian culture here is to talk about these things, don't do them. If he actually, if he, and he did great this week at the White House. Like I think Jameson Greer's description of him as a man of substance is, I think we can, let's ride that animal. And so as a man of substance and a guy that talks about, hey, I from Edmonton, then he should fully understand that I believe that he can put this fire out by taking action and doing something different than the prior government that he now leads with some of the same people in place. And as I said in the show, Wilkinson, Guilbeault, we will see where they end up, because that will tell a little bit of the tale here in terms of can we take him seriously on his words or not. I hope for one, I absolutely hope and am cheerleading that he comes through with what he has talked about in a very quick manner. I really do.
And I'm pretty sure he's going to listen to this podcast. So, Prime Minister Carney, give us a call.
Please.
We'll help you out. Yeah.
855-776-6147. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, that's enough. Tired.
Have a great weekend, everybody. It's Mother's Day on Sunday. We didn't get a chance to say it on the show. So, everybody.
Oh, it is Mother's Day this weekend. That's right.
Yeah, it is. So if you have a mother, or if you're married to one, if your children have a mother, you better be doing some things. Okay?
Probably not well timing on my part to say some nasty stuff about Mother Nature.
Well, whatevs. But I think we're all allowed to. It's seeding and planting. We're allowed to be a bit grouchy about it.
Very
it was
dry.
very cold this morning. Hey,
everybody. Thanks a lot. Hey, send that feedback. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Can't wait to read those emails. Talk to you later.